Welcome to the recording of our Using Microsoft Forms session that we ran on the 29th of October. We've started the recording after we showed our Using Forms video, which you can find on our Digital Learning Renfrewshire YouTube channel. Thanks.
Hi everyone, today we're going to look at how to use Microsoft Forms within Glow. Now the first thing we have to do is first log into Glow, and from there we'll get access to all of the Microsoft tools that are available. So Forms isn't always easy to find on the Glow home screen, and from the Launchpad the first thing that I try to do is to find one of the Microsoft Office tools, such as SharePoint, Mail, anything like that. So if we click on Mail, for example, it'll take us into our mail icon, and from there we can use the Microsoft Waffle to find all of the other Office 365 tools, such as Forms. Now the Waffle is usually up the top left hand corner of the screen, and when we click on that we can see all the other apps that we want to use. So click on Forms to get started. So if it's your first time in Forms, it will give you a little overview of what you can do there. So it says you can easily create quizzes, surveys and polls. So what we're going to do is start by creating a new form to get started. So this is the basic overview of Microsoft Forms when you're creating a brand new form. We can see at the top we have a space for writing a title. There's also an area for adding in new questions, and at the top right of that you can see there's another tab here for responses as well. Okay, so to get started, the first thing that we're going to do is give the form a title. So this means that you'll know what the form's called, and anybody else who's filling in the form will have a title and maybe a description of what the form's going to ask them to do. So this one's going to be a pupil survey, and we're just calling it for a test school. Sometimes you get little pop-ups that will block up, just click them to make them to go away. So when you're entering a description, this is going to be for whoever's filling out the survey. It's really useful to give them an idea of what they've been asked to do, how long it's going to take, and maybe how long it will take them to get results back, that kind of thing. So here we're saying the survey is designed to get your thoughts about what you love about your school. So this might not be the most believable survey you'll ever put out there, but it gives us an idea for a start. You can also insert images, so if you wanted to put your school logo, a picture of the school, you can either upload that. Right now I'm just going to do a Bing search for a school building just so you can see what it looks like when it's in there. But you can upload these from your OneDrive or your computer. So there we go, we've given it a title, we've given it a description, and we're just going to add our first question. Now in Forms there are several options for the different types of question you can get. Often the best way to create a form is to think about how you want to report your form. So what I mean by that is, what information do you need to get out of your form will kind of inform how you create your form in the first place. So for example, at the end of this exercise, would you want to break the information down by year groups, for example? Would you want to find out any more demographic information about where people live, that kind of thing? So you need to start building that into your form at the beginning. It's much easier to do this at the start than it is to try and break forms down by pupil year group, for example, if you haven't asked that question initially. So save yourself some time and make sure you're asking those demographic questions, usually in a kind of quantitative form. And what I mean by that is make sure it's more of a tick box that they have to hit as opposed to something they have to write, and that's much easier to break that down. We'll show you that in the first question we come to. So you get a few different choices of question here. You get a choice box, which is more a multiple choice, a text response, which allows me to put in a text answer as opposed to a numerical answer. Ratings, which are really good, allows people to use like a little 5-star system if you like. Give it 1 out of 5 stars if you as a rating. You've got date fields as well as a couple of other ones there, such as Likert scale, which is a bit more involved, and we'll maybe cover that at the end. So again, most of the time we're going to stick to the top 4 ones that are there. They're pretty easy to use. So we're going to start here by asking pupils which year group they belong to. Again, this helps us with the demographic information, that if you want to find out what P1 said versus P2s, P3s, P4, P6, we can do that. And all you're doing is typing in the option and adding in more options if you need to. At the right hand side of every option you'll see a little recycle bin. If you click on that you can take an option away, or if an option doesn't exist and you need to put in an other option, you can do that. Now you can either set this to be required, which in this case I would recommend you do that, or if it's a multiple choice question but you envisage they'll have more than one answer, you can set it to multiple answers as well. Once you've completed that question and you're happy with that, just click on add new at the bottom to add your second question. Now this time we're going to try and give them a text response question. So at this point we're just asking them, what is your favourite thing about your school? And we've set this to a text question. Now we can either ask for a long answer, a short answer, and again we can insert a picture in here if we wanted to. And yeah, that's again about as involved as you need to get with that. And that would be a pretty straightforward text response. Now the next thing you could do is, once you're finished that, is continue to add in more questions. This time we'll try a rating scale. Now we can see here is how would you rate the school dinners or school lunches. Now again, these are just hypothetical questions, you don't have to be asking these. You can see we can change that rating level from 1 to 10, so how many stars would you give it? 5 stars, 10 stars, somewhere in between that. And we can change it to a number value as well if that's easier, 1 being the lowest, 10 being the highest, how would you rate it? And again we can set that to being required if we want to. The final question I'm going to look at, just to give you an example of it, is a Likert scale question. This allows us to plot statements in rows versus answers in a column. So for example, I'm writing I love PE and I enjoy outdoor breaks as 2 of my questions, and the responses that I want to write, I want people to complete, would be at the top of this. So for example, this could be a true statement, could be a false statement, you don't agree with it, or you simply don't know. And again, we've got 5 options here, but you can add in more or delete options as required. So if you click on one, hit the recycle bin, and if you want to add more, hit the add button. Again, that's about as hard as it's going to get for creating a survey within Microsoft Forms. Very, very simple. It's all about the questions you want to ask and the way you want to report it. That's probably the 2 most important things, because if you don't have the right questions, you won't get the right answers. This is what a basic survey would look like without any themes being applied to it. So it's quite basic, there's nothing kind of glamorous about it. So these themes we can use to make it a little bit more engaging for pupils, and you just click through until you find one that you like. There are quite a few to choose from, which is good. So I'm just going to click this one at the bottom. And there we go, a theme has been selected, so it looks a little bit more engaging now. We can see our questions are appearing. We also have an immersive reader tool. If people click on the microphone or loudspeaker icon, it will actually read the questions to them. You could use these immersive reading tools with anyone who has, for example, a visual impairment, and that means that the questions will be read aloud to them. So we've got our questions, we've got our theme. The only thing we really need to do now is share the survey so that we can start to collect responses. That's where we use the share button. Now, the share button will give you access to creating a link or sending this out via email. One thing to note is the default position in this is that only people in your organisation can respond, and that would mean that only anyone who has a Glow account could respond to your survey. So if you want to send this to parents, we need to make sure that we change that to say anyone with this link can respond. Then all we need to do is copy that link and put it into any emails or put it on our website and people can complete it. If we have this linked up to our Outlook accounts, we can click on the email sign and that will allow us to send it straight from there. Or you can embed it as a QR code, or even embed it in your school website, as I said. Once that link goes out, it's very easy for people just to click on it and complete the survey. I'm going to open a new window and just paste that in. And this is what it's going to look like when you send it out. So I'm going to just start completing it. I'm in P1, favourite thing about the school. Again, there's the immersive reader if we wanted to read them aloud. Favourite thing about the school, maybe you're saying something, maybe your pupils are really nice and they're going to say that the teaching staff are awesome. And again, with the school lunches, we can clearly see that it's a rating system here. You've got 5 stars, and you can give it out of 5 stars for that. The Likert scale question again allows us just to put in our answers there and submit, and it lets us know that that's been submitted, so they will know that that response has gone to the school and it's been collected. If we now go back to our survey, you can see we've got one response, and if we click on responses, it will tell us the information there. Right now, 100% of the people who completed the survey were in P1, but we only have one response at the moment, so that's why we can see that. And we get a bit of a graphical breakdown there. Here's our responses. Teaching staff are awesome. They're giving the lunches 5 stars. And in terms of the questions about PE and outdoor learning, you can see they've answered those as well. You can even see individual responses. Here's the only response that's been completed. It's by someone anonymous because we never asked their name. It only took them 30 seconds to complete it. They're in P1, and again we can see all of the responses. So if you wanted an individual response, you could look at that as well. That is the long and short of forms. You could export all of this to Excel. Again, that's maybe if you want to do a bit more analysis, you can do that. I find that the generic template you get on forms is very, very good and gives us an overview of exactly what we need. So I tend not to go too far beyond that. Really, this is just about thinking about the right questions and planning your survey. Once you've completed your survey and sent it out, you can close down forms. When you come back into forms for the next time, you'll be greeted with this kind of home screen, and here you can see all of the surveys that I've been doing recently with education staff. You can also do quizzes, which follow a very similar format. It's just a case of creating your quiz and thinking about what you want to do with that there. Again, this is where you'll find all the information. You can revisit any of the forms that you've created. You can look back at them. You can even copy them if you want to issue them and maybe make them slightly different for 2021, for example. You could do that. Here's some other surveys that I've created. They all follow the same format and they all give you the same way of pulling your data out. So they're all very, very useful. But that's just a quick overview of how the system works, how you can create a very quick survey, and how you can get it out to parents and staff using the quick share link. You can also very quickly turn your form or what you want to do into a quiz. Now, instead of selecting the form option, select quiz and just create your quiz in the same way that you would create a form. Give it a title, give it a description. The questions are more or less the same. The only difference now is that when you're creating a quiz, you'll have to select a correct answer and also assign a number of points to your quiz questions. So just like before, select a question type. Right now we're going to do a multiple choice, and we're going to put in here something like which subject is the best. It doesn't really matter what we're doing, it's just for illustration. Put in your questions, put in the answers that you think people might respond to, as well as the correct answer. And down the right hand side we can now see a small tick. That tick indicates which answer is the correct answer, and you can have obviously more than one correct answer. At the bottom left you're going to type in the number of points that you want to award. Now this just has to be a number that you put in there. We can make this a multiple answer question, and we can also make it required. So we'll just quickly add in a second question just by clicking the add button. And again, selecting the question type that you want to add, we can add in another choice question. And again, repeat the process, put in your answers, put in the correct answer using the tick, make it a multiple answer question or make it a required question. So for example, what year was the moon landing? I'm hoping this is the right answer if we put 1969 as the top answer. And if people guess that correct, they'll get 1 point. And finally, we could do the same with a text question. So in this question, we're asking people who played Captain Jack Sparrow, with the right answer being Johnny Depp. So all we have to do is write a question, write your answer, and add that in at the bottom there. So we add in our correct answer using the plus button for add answer. And again, if we want to add more questions, we repeat this process as often as we need to until we've got our complete quiz. Once we've done that, you're going to want to set a theme if you want to make it look a bit more impressive, and we also need to share it with our pupils. Have a quick preview of the form just to make sure that the quiz is sitting the right way and the questions make sense. You can also change some of the settings in there. So for example, you can show the responses automatically once they complete it. You can decide who can fill it in. Please make sure that you tick the box to say that anyone can fill in the quiz if you're unsure if they'll be doing it through Glow. Otherwise you will be able to do it. You can also set a start date and an end date for the quiz, and you can add in a custom message to say thanks for taking the quiz if you want to. Sharing settings are exactly the same. You would just click on the share link, change it so that anyone can respond if they've got a link. You can drop this in your class team if you've got one in your Google Classroom or wherever you want to put it, send it out an email. And if we just click some of these answers, we can give you an idea of how that data sits when we get a response back through. So just submitting that now, and then we need to go up to the response panel. Once we click on that, we'll see that we've got one response sitting in there. It also gives us that overview of how we did in the quiz. As you can see, not very well. And if we go back, we can have a look at the responses. Here they are. And we just get a little overview of how people have done in the quiz. Obviously, there's only one response so far, so it's not going to give you the best impression of that. The more people that respond to it, the more that'll look like a full chart. That brings us to the end of our overview of Microsoft Forms. Hope you found that useful, and thanks very much for your time.
The first bit, I'm not going to share my screen because what I'm going to get you to do is actually take part in a wee quiz. One of the ways that I've used this tool in the classroom is just as a really short, snappy formative assessment tool. So where you would typically be using mini whiteboards or exit tickets, hinge point questions, you've got a question in mind that you want to assess the kids on. It's a really short, sharp way of doing that and using the information live in class. So I've pre-prepared a question that I think is going to be critical to the lesson. And what I'm going to do is ask learners to respond to it. I have to be honest, I've done this in the past, allowing them to use phones because I'm in secondary and most kids have got a phone. And when they don't have data and stuff like that, I found I can get a full class response by saying, if you've got a phone, if you wouldn't mind letting someone else type the answer in once you're done, or if I've got a couple of laptops that I've got access to, or iPads or things like that to make up the difference. And I always just frame it as like, oh, don't worry if your data's run out or your battery's run out, just to take the kind of shine off kids who maybe don't have a device and my battery's run out or whatever. And so I'm going to pop up a quiz in the chat. I think it's the right one, hope it is. And I want you to all go and click on that and answer the multiple choice question that's in there.
Holy, what are you doing to us?
So this was a £1 million question on Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, so don't feel too bad if you do that. I wanted a question that would get a range of responses. So click on what you think it should be. And so far I've had 6 responses. And I can see that actually half the class have got that right. Okay, so I'm going to allow just a wee bit of time, and then I'll share with you.
There's only 10 of us here, so you've got half of us.
Right, that's us. Yeah. So what I'll do now is I'll start sharing my screen, and we can have a look at what that looked like for me. So I'm hoping you've got my screen now. Can you see my results screen there?
It's just coming up now, Lee, yeah? That's it.
Just coming up. So you can see that really short and sharp, I've managed to get a response from the class. And I'm not really interested in this case in knowing who said what. I'm more interested in, has that piece of learning stuck? Or is there a misconception? And obviously, if I was doing a multiple choice question, I've got a maths background, so I'd have planned the wrong answers to be kind of feasible or rooted in the most common mistakes. And I would be using that as a learning opportunity. So formative assessment tool, exit tickets, within the lesson as a hinge question, it's really, really useful. What I would point out as well is that it's not always that you know the question you're going to ask. It kind of sometimes depends on the lesson, and you maybe say to yourself, right, I need to stop them here and get a feel for how they're getting on with this. And it doesn't always have to be multiple choice. So what I've got is another form, And I'm just going to show how I would always have one of these sitting in my list of forms so that I can just use it at any time. So I've got a formative blank text response form just pre-made, and you can duplicate forms to use them again. You just hit copy and you can reuse them over and over again. So this is a form setup that I would have quite often, and I'm going to share it with you again in the chat. So this is much more dynamic. It doesn't have to be planned in advance. It takes seconds to get out to your pupils if you've got a vehicle to do that through Teams or writing a link on the board. And actually, I'm going to ask you a question. So it's a verbal question that you're going to respond to in forms. So I want to know, in snooker, how many points is the blue ball worth? So just answer that on the form. Doesn't have to, don't think about it too much. But I'm just making the point that you can be dynamic and still quickly use the form. You don't have to have pre-created the question on the form. It's giving you the vehicle to ask a question and quickly gather responses in the way that maybe a mini whiteboard would. But if this is after the lesson, you can go back in and have a look and see where it was going wrong for folks. So again, I'll just show you that. I've had 5 responses so far. And you can see this time that my responses, it's all text-based. So one person said 5. So 5 is the correct answer. I can see that the majority of my class have got that wrong. So that would then frame the next steps in learning, whether or not that was during that lesson or in a future lesson. So forms can be really responsive and dynamic. You can use them as a really quick snapshot for formative assessment. And I do that quite often in class. So having that template saved in your forms and just copying it is a really useful thing to do, because it's just there at the drop of a hat if you decide, no, I need to get a feel for what's going on across the classroom. So I'm just going to drop in and see if anyone's got any questions on that at the moment. No. Seems fine. So what I'm going to do next is, I am a secondary practitioner, but I do think that this has got a lot of potential for any teacher who marks pieces of written work. So I'm going to put myself in the shoes of a history teacher who wants to assign a piece of homework. Okay, the piece of homework that I want to assign is this here. It's from a past paper, and I would like kids to see. I'm just going to zoom in. That might be a bit small for you. I would like kids to complete these 3 questions here, and you can see the marks are 9, 4, and 6 marks. These are not short responses. The quiz feature is not going to be able to mark this for me, but it's really going to help me in marking and providing feedback to young people. And I'm thinking at the moment, especially with like COVID guidelines, I'm not going to have to quarantine jotters or wear gloves or anything like that. So what I've done is I've taken these questions and I've put them into a quiz. So I selected quiz, and what I did was copied those questions in, and I selected the text response, and I made it a long answer so that pupils have got plenty of space to write, and I entered the value of each question. Okay, so you can see the long answer feature in there. Now, what I think is really powerful about this is when we share this link with pupils, they'll get the assessment, the homework. They can use the immersive reader tool to make it more accessible. So straight away, you don't need to worry about printing out a large print copy or anything like that, or print on a different colour of paper. And what you can see here is I've pre-filled this. So I'm a pupil wanting to respond to this question. You can see I've actually got 500 words of text in there. It's going to allow that much text to go in. Okay. And then you can see for the other questions, the militant tactics used by the suffragettes, I've just chucked a few things in there. And I'm going to submit this work to my teacher. Now, the important thing here is, because I want to know who's submitting this work, when I made the form, in the settings part, I wanted only people in my organisation, and I wanted to record their name. Okay, because what that's going to do is allow me to see who's actually responded to the homework, who's handed it in. So unlike all of the other quizzes, I do want it to be only people in my organisation, and I do want to collect their name. So when I submit this, you can see it says, "Hi Lee, when you submit this form, the owner will be able to see your name and email address." So I submit the form. It says view results. There aren't any results because the quiz feature obviously can't mark a history assignment. The results will not come through until my teacher actually goes and marks it. So as the teacher, you can see I've now got a response in here. What I can do is review the answers. So I can see here I've got Lee Gray's work in front of me. And what I really love about this is some teachers like to mark per person, so they'll mark a pupil's full response. And some teachers like to mark all of the question ones first, then all of the question twos, then all of the question threes. You can do that. So you can either mark by pupil or by question. And that, you know, for some exam questions, it just make sure you're really consistent in your marking. So I maybe read through Lee's response and say that's a 4-mark response. And I'm going to give a bit of feedback in there as well. I just clicked on the little quotation mark. I'm going to give a bit of feedback and say be more, and that will be my feedback for that question. For this question here, the militant tactics, yeah, okay, like maybe it's 2 marks, but I'm going to say more details, please. And then this one here, maybe they're saying the population's eating too much, but actually I might want them to go and think a bit more about the, you know, the other factors. So I'm going to say, I think you've got the wrong end of the stick. So review class notes, maybe. So I'm giving feedback to the young person, and what I then do is I click on the 3 dots and I hit post scores, and I get this message that says, you know, this will go out to the learner. So I've posted the scores. What will happen now is when that pupil goes back in, I think I might have to enter the link again. Yeah. So if I was to copy that link back in again as the pupil, you can see here, I can see that I've scored 6 out of 19. And I can see that my response to the first question got me a score of 4 out of 9 points. And I can see that my teacher has said to me that I have to be more succinct. I think that's a really, really powerful tool. I hope that that illustrates the potential of it. What I would point out is I actually entered the questions onto that form. You can create almost like a dummy form that runs alongside an existing resource. So say you wanted to assign, for example, an English past paper on RUAE, has a huge screed of text. That's going to be difficult for me to get into a form. I don't want to sit copying in all of these questions. So all I've done here is I've created a form. And you can see in the description what I've said is this quiz accompanies 2019 RUAE paper, and I've given them the link to that. So what I'm saying is use this link to get the paper, but enter your answers here. And I've just gone through, I've left the question blank and just assigned the correct number of points. So question 1 in the English paper is worth 4 marks. So in my form, I'm not bothering writing out question 1, but I've got in there that it's worth 4 marks. And again, I can gather a full written response, mark it, give feedback, and get it back to the learner without ever having to exchange a piece of paper, which I think currently is pretty useful, but it also is going to be good in that as learners complete it, you're getting the response. So rather than collecting in 30 jotters on a Friday, it might well be that you set a week to do it and you get through a couple of them throughout that week. I think would be quite handy.
What I wanted to do was more from a primary perspective, but also some secondary examples, was just to share what you might be able to use forms for. And as Lee said there, at the moment, particularly where paper is a bit of an issue, this could be a good opportunity to use forms as a way around. So I know that in my last school, we encouraged all of the children to be part of a pupil committee, but that is a nightmare when you have, several hundred pieces of paper. So I've just put together a really simple form that asks the kids, please tell us what form or what committees or teams that you want to be a part of. So if we scroll down, you can see that it's just really basic.
Can I just interrupt for 1 second, Julie, just so this will save time later on? At the top, this is the link that Julie sent to me. I've got the option to duplicate it, so I am then making my own copy of the form, which is what Lee was talking about earlier. So you'll need to duplicate all of the links we send you. Sorry, Julie, scroll down.
No, not a problem. So you can see we've put in the children's names, and for question number 2, I've just quite simply put in a drop-down menu for them to choose which class they're from. That's really straightforward to do. This one's just for P4 to 7, but you can add in all stages and you can split it into specific classes. And then you can see I've just asked the children to select what pupil group or committee or leadership role would they like to be considered for. And again, because you've got the template, you can put that in. And if you want to make it a bit more like an application form, they would then use the text box. Now, if I was to go into the settings on this, I've chosen a longer response setting on the form, and that just means that the children have got as much space as they want to be able to type. You don't want pages and pages, but it doesn't curtail their responses. So that's just one example of how you could use it. If any of you have learners who are self-isolating, you might have seen that on the website to support those learners, there's a selection of reading quizzes. So Pam, if you don't mind bringing that one up. I've got one in Titanic to show you. So a couple of really cool options here. Either you can copy and paste a text from somewhere, or what I did here was these were from some Pri-Med cards, and I used Office Lens to take a photograph of the text, convert it into a Word document, and then just copied and pasted it into a form. So these literally just took a couple of minutes each to set up. So here the children have the text, and this has been set up as a quiz. So when you go into forms, you're creating a new quiz. Once you've got a format that you're happy with, again, you can just duplicate each time. So here we've just taken a copy of the text, and then it's multiple choice questions and answers. But what I really like about this one is that when the children have finished, when they submit the form, it's self-correcting. So they'll be told which of their answers are correct, and it gives them the opportunity to go back and to have another try. So that's just another use that's really, really simple. And also, since I am the literacy person, I did have to get another literacy example in. But lots of you who are either English or primary teachers will know that one of the reading strategies that we quite heavily promote is Aidan Chambers' 3 sharings. So just to show you an example of what that might look like digitally, we've got the poem Brendan Gallagher by Jackie Kay. And so again, I've just put some brief instructions in here. I've taken a copy of the poem, and then underneath you can see that we've asked the children just very simply to share their likes, any dislikes, and if they've got any puzzles or connections that they can make. So that could be something that the children and young people could do in advance to bring to a group discussion, or it could be something that, with regards to a piece of text, you could do to see what the children's understanding of it is, and also if there's any misconceptions about the text that you can target straight away. So that's just one kind of social use of it across the school, and a couple of literacy uses that you might want to consider.
Thanks, Julie, that was great. I've got a couple of other things that I will share with you, but I'm just going to share it as part of the chat. I used it for a parental survey, so I've given you a copy of that. I used it as an evaluation. We changed our newsletter to a sway format, so we just did a quick evaluation with parents in terms of what they thought of that. And also I've got one that the children created themselves, which was when we were doing some research around how good is our school. The children were interested in relationships, and we created a survey, they created a survey using the forms, which they then shared with all the classes. So all of those examples will be in the little document that we're about to share in the chat for you. Excuse me, my voice is going. So if I just pop that into the chat, it allows you to have a wee look at all the different documents, and because we've got people from all different areas and stages, it allows you to have a look at that and see if there's any particular one that you want to talk to. As I said, you will need to duplicate all of these, so just be aware of that. Right, I'm going to breathe and I'm going to open the chat up, or even, we've got quite a small number, so if you want to pop your mic on, pop your screen on, you can ask us any questions about any of the stuff that you've seen so far, but I have given you access to all of those forms that Julie and Lee created, so you can get access to them later. Okay. Do you think everybody's just going away and like trying out these and duplicating them themselves just now? Quite right, I would be.
Either that or we've stunned everyone into silence.
Well, we do like to do that too.
Sorry, I don't have any questions, but I actually thought that was a really good session. More so, getting other ideas for talking's sake, gathering the eco-council together, rather than boxes of paper of responses or what have you. And even as far as to send a survey out to the parents to see what do they want in the newsletter.
Yeah.
Things make such a difference. It's been a great session. Thank
And
you very much.
What we love about the forms is the fact that you can do it as a QR code and things like that. So I know certainly you can post it on your school website as a QR code, and then they just need their phone and it automatically takes them straight to that survey, which is great. We used it with a class when we had an open morning. The kids set up the questions they wanted to ask the parents, and it was the exit pass for the parents. They weren't allowed to leave the class until they had clicked on the QR code and filled in what they thought about the open morning.
That's a great idea, yeah.
I know you're not having these things at the moment, but it's about the creative ways you're doing it. If you're having a session online with parents, for example, if you're doing something, it's another way to do it.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you very much.
Hi, Carol.
Hi, I would put my camera on, but I was caught in the rain on the way home. So honestly, nobody needs to see me. We've actually used Google Forms and Microsoft Forms for our health and wellbeing surveys for the kids after kind of returning to school, after COVID and after lockdown. And it's been really useful actually, and a really good way to gather how everybody's feeling. And we've used it for staff as well and parents. So it is a really, useful tool that, so thanks very much for this presentation, because I will take it back and share it with the rest of the staff, and hopefully, they can get on and start doing things like that as well.
Yeah, no, that's really good to hear, Carol, and that's why we purposely gave you the sample ones that we've shared with you. And after the meeting, when you get the evaluation form as well, which we'll pop in the chat just now for people to use, but we'll also email it out. Everyone will have access so that you can share it with all your staff and let them have a look at some of our examples. I mean, what Lee's talking about there in terms of feedback and the ways that you can do it, it is so powerful at this time, and it's great to be able to just have that dialogue. It's the thing I always talk about. What's the point in asking the kids to do something if you don't talk to them about their learning? They always want to know, how did I do? Did I do it right? And how can I make it better? So Ross has just popped the evaluation into the chat for you now.
Yeah, I think definitely people have already touched on, for self-evaluation, it's just invaluable, because the data that you get back, number one, I think you get a bigger response rate in sending letters home or forms, paper forms. Number two, you don't, as you said, sitting there with a box with 300 responses in it, it's really hard to make sense of that, whereas the software gives you the overview, and you can actually analyse it properly rather than just having the data.
I think, we found certainly with the exit passes with the kids, you often leave a sticky ask the parents to write on a sticky and stuff like that. But actually, it was amazing the amount of data we had, and it was all saved, and there wasn't, we lost our stickies, or somebody accidentally put them in the bin. You had all that data saying what parents thought and about ways to improve the events when you're running next time. So even using it from that point of view, which is a more admin type thing rather than a classroom thing, it's just, as you said, it's a very powerful tool. And I love the idea. The self-marking for me, that's just a dream. I love the forms that you've created on our self-isolating site, Julie, where there's all that information. You read the text and then you get told whether or not you've got it right. That's just a bonus for the kids for that instant feedback.
And it saves you some marking, which is always a good thing.